Welcome. What a fantastic space, a magnificent space. I have spoken in many places before, but I can think of very few as fantastic as this in design, and that represent so well what it is that you do for your work and what you give to your society and your profession. I was asked last night I asked one of you, who was your favorite sociologist? My PhD I was a teacher, but my PhD is in sociology. And the person I was speaking to, an Italian colleague of yours, said it was the Frenchman, Pierre Bourdieu. And we didn't have time to continue the conversation, because then I would have been able to say, who was my favorite sociologist? And the answer is Antonio Gramsci. And of the many things, and I read everything Gramsci wrote, almost, when I was still in my 20s and 30s. And one of the things, if you recall, that Antonio Gramsci said is that all of us, all people, are intellectuals, even if we don't all have the function of intellectuals. But he might have said, of those who do have the function of intellectuals, the most important, perhaps, is the teacher. The teacher is an intellectual. The teacher is what Gramsci called an organic intellectual. An intellectual who is not only making a difference in the lives of many individual children, as you do, but who makes the biggest difference for the lives of those who come from families who are poor, who are marginalized, who are disadvantaged, who live in conditions of inequality, who are handicapped, who have disabilities, who are immigrants, who come from cultural minorities, that now, today, we would say to be this kind of intellectual is to be an intellectual, a teacher, whose cause is social justice, whose cause is equity, whose cause is to ensure that whatever family you come from, whatever background you have, your capacity to learn and your right to learn is the same as anyone else. And this is what teachers do and try to do. In the words, this time, of a Frenchman, Émile Durkheim, we create the generations of the future. The future depends on its teachers. The future depends on the quality of our teachers. The future depends on teachers not only being intellectuals, but being treated as intellectuals. And this fits, actually, with one of the biggest agendas at the moment worldwide. An agenda which finally recognizes the blindingly obvious fact that of all the things inside the school that affect student achievement and student learning, the most important of all these is not whether you have a centralized system, is not whether you have a standard curriculum, is not how many tests or examinations you have, is not whether there's a lot or a little accountability, is not even the quality of the leadership of the principal. The most important factor inside the school is the quality of the teacher. And across the political spectrum now, everyone appears at this moment to recognize that the most important thing is quality teaching and the quality of the teacher. But the people who are most prominent in bringing this issue to our attention of teacher quality are the people who also most misunderstand what teacher quality requires and what it consists of. At the same time, they elevate its importance and they misunderstand its nature. And this is the issue I want to explore with you today. I am talking more slowly than I do usually because Italian is a much more beautiful and also much longer language than English. So do forgive me if I sound like I'm on drugs. So, we have a choice at the moment. We have a choice in terms of thinking about how we deal with quality teaching. Hopefully, it's a better choice than Woody Allen, the famous New York American comedian. By the way, Woody Allen is a comedian, but he's not yet a politician. And I've lived in America now for 10 years, but originally I am from England, as you can tell by the accent. And I would say the only difference between Mr. Grillo, the only difference between Mr. Grillo and the politicians of England is that at least Mr. Grillo is honest about the fact that he is a comedian. So here's what Woody Allen said. Woody Allen said this, and I'll just show it to you because I can't remember what it actually is in English. I think it's something like more than at any time in history we face a choice. This is one path. And the other path? So what should we do? This is perhaps a good way to understand the Italian election. So let's hope we have... Let's hope we have a better choice than this. And the way to think of it, having begun with Antonio Gramsci, is through the strange idea, which seems like a different ideological framework, of professional capital, the idea of capital. What do we mean by capital? And when we think in economics, whether we are Karl Marx or Adam Smith or Warren Buffett in America, capital simply means adding value to net worth. There are many ways since Adam Smith and Karl Marx we've come to think about capital as a metaphor. We think about human capital with children, that education from the 1960s has been seen not as a cost, but as an investment in the next generation. In the 1970s, an African-American lawyer, James Lowry in America, used the term social capital. Social capital described really what are our assets together. What do we have together? So a child from a poor family who had strong networks and advocates would do better than a child from an equally poor family with weak advocates and networks. This is the idea of social capital. The environmentalists use the idea of natural capital, how we look after sustainably the resources of the earth. I don't know how this translates, but in English there's even a book now called Erotic Capital. I think you understand English very well, actually. I also give speeches on this, and they have much bigger audiences than this one. So capital is a kind of metaphor. And in education, Michael Fullen, my co-author, and I believe at the moment there's a battle, a war, between a vision of the future based on two different kinds of capital in teaching. The first is business capital. And by the way, Alessandra redid all the pictures, and I think they're fantastic, fantastic pictures. The first is business capital. Business capital globally, especially, but not only in the Anglo-Saxon nations now, but also in places like Sweden and other countries too. The vision of public education at the moment is that its prime purpose, its first purpose, is to be a market for short-term profits for those who invest in it. Much of this you will not see yet in Italy, but I guarantee that it will come. It is seen as a market for technology products, for computers, for software. Tens of billions of dollars, some people estimate. It is seen as a market for textbooks, for testing products all over the world. It is seen as a market increasingly for private schools or for running public schools as if they were private schools. In America, in England, in Sweden, these things are now very, very, very far advanced. And I'm not opposed, by the way, I should clarify too, the existence of a private sector. I work in a Catholic university, which is a private university. There is a place for private alternatives. But when the main purpose of public education is to yield profits for private interests, then we see a major difficulty. Because this also means that if you want to make profit of public education, what is the greatest saving that you can make? And the answer is teachers' salaries. Teachers' salaries are the biggest cost of public education. So if you can somehow keep teachers' salaries low, you increase the return short term that you make in public education reform. And there are many ways in which this occurs. In the business capital view, in the Anglo-Saxon countries, what this is leading to is the following. So beware. At the moment, perhaps the problem in Italy is many older teachers on low wages. But beware of the alternative, because the alternative is this. The alternative is, in the business capital view, that teaching is not hard, but teaching is easy. It is perhaps difficult to control a class, but teaching is technically easy. There's not too much to learn in the knowledge of what you teach, in the knowledge of how children's brains work, in the knowledge of pedagogy. It's seen as easy, not hard. If it's seen as easy, it's seen as something you can learn quickly rather than something that takes a long time. It's something that poorly qualified people can do rather than something that well-qualified people can do. And although your problem at the moment may be too many teachers who are too old and in the way of younger alternatives, beware what has happened in America, where the modal number, this is the most commonly occurring number of years in teaching of teachers in America now, is 1. There are more teachers with 1 year of experience than any other year, because the conditions of teaching in America and the incentives given to teachers surround the idea that teaching is something that people will come and do for 2 or 3 years and then leave to go and do something else afterwards. The training is short, the enthusiasm is great, the time is brief, the cost is low. So as you battle with your problem of low wages of older teachers, beware of the alternatives that will come your way. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because this will be the next battle that you must fight. And part of that at the very bottom with technology is the view that technology does not enhance teaching, but technology can replace teaching. In states in America now, it is a requirement that students in secondary school must do 1 course online. If you have to do a course online, you're spending less time with your teacher. You have less need for teachers, even though there is no evidence that studying online is more effective than studying face-to-face with a teacher. This is not an argument against technology. In Canada, in Singapore, in this book, The Global Fourth Way, I've seen outstanding examples of teachers working with technology to enhance teachers and technology together, making deeper, more effective pedagogy. So this is not an argument against technology, but it is an argument against replacing teachers with technology. So what is the opposite of this view? It's a view that Michael Fullan and I call professional capital. We did not decide to write a book on professional capital. We stumbled across the idea, as many inventions do, in the middle of writing this book, because we had an idea but no word for it. We then thought, many people must have written about professional capital. So we went to Google, Wikipedia, Amazon, Google Scholar. There's almost nothing on. There are 1 or 2 papers in the area of health, but there's almost nothing on this, what we believe is a powerful idea, not only for teaching, but for other professions as well. What are the assumptions of professional capital? That teaching is technically difficult. Knowing your subject, understanding how the brain works, being able to diagnose children with different special educational needs and learning disabilities, knowing how to vary your teaching if your students are from Afghanistan or Iran or Turkey or another culture. All this requires technical knowledge, deep knowledge, the knowledge of a professional. It takes time to learn. It takes long periods of practice. It takes continuous learning. It takes help from other teachers. You cannot do this only by yourself. And you can do it with technology, but technology cannot do it for you instead. These are some of the assumptions of professional capital. So, I have no idea what this says because the pictures are different, but I do know what this says. So there are really three things behind professional capital. There are three components, and the simple way to summarize the entire rest of the argument today is simply this. If you want teacher quality, you must do three things. Three things, they're very simple. One is find a way to choose the best people. Two, get them to work together. Three, make sure that they stay and keep learning and growing. Find the best people, get them to work together, make sure that they stay. It's a very simple theory of action. It is so desperately obvious, and yet everyone else who is talking about teacher quality does not have this theory. They have some other theory. They're bizarre theories. They are theories such as, let's reward the best teachers and punish the worst teachers. Let's compare teachers against each other. Let's select from the lowest end of the ability range and then keep checking on people to make sure they do their jobs properly. It's a strange theory of action. So three components of professional capital then are these. Human capital, which is your individual qualities, qualifications, experience, skills. Social capital, which is the skills, the knowledge that we have together in collaboration, in trust, in cooperation. And what we call, from a term borrowed from the field of law, decisional capital. How you make decisions and develop the power to make effective judgments over time. If you put these three things together, it's not quite E equals MC squared. It's not quite E equals MC squared, but it is, professional capital is a function, an interaction of human, social, and decisional capital. And I'll go through these now one by one. In general, I'll talk about the general principles. In the book, Professional Capital, there are many examples drawn from our research. And briefly, I will mention some of these from other countries as we move along. Probably you will be familiar with them. So, here is human capital. Your qualifications, how rigorous they are. Your knowledge, how long the period of preparation is. How effective you are in your competence. What emotional capacities you have with empathy and your ability to engage with a diverse population of students around you. This is human capital, the capital of individuals. And it's important, and probably at the moment, the most important issue, as I understand it, in Italy. What does getting better human capital actually mean? What does finding and attracting really good teachers truly mean? If you look at the list on the slide behind you, it means that let's take pay as the very first thing. The thing about teachers' pay is that, not that it is very good pay, quite good pay and very good pay makes no difference in attracting people into teaching. The point of pay is to avoid bad pay. If you have bad pay, it is a disincentive. It stops people coming into teaching because they believe they cannot live or pay for their apartments, their homes. So the first thing is to avoid bad pay. In Finland, which is the highest performing country in Europe on PISA, the pay of teachers is just the average of developed countries. It's not very high, but it's not very low either. It is good enough, and that is what the pay needs to be. Once the pay is right, once it is not a disincentive, then there are other things that attract teachers into teaching. One is the status of teaching in the society. How do your politicians talk about teachers and teaching? In your municipality, in your states, in the whole country. Do they criticize teachers? Do they ignore teachers? Or do they speak of teachers as the saviors of the future of the society? In 1992, Finland had 19% unemployment because of the collapse of the Russian market after the Berlin Wall. At this time, the President, the Prime Minister, the heads of the universities, and the heads of business decided that the answer to Finland's financial problems was to invest in education, that its only resource was its people, so it must become probably the best knowledge economy, the most creative people in the world. And in doing this, they recognized they would need quality teachers. They attract quality teachers. If you apply to be a teacher in Finland, you have a 1 in 10 chance of being accepted in primary school. If you're looking for a husband in Finland, the number one preferred occupation of a future wife, actually, the number one preferred occupation of a future wife is to be a teacher. The number two preferred occupation, of a future husband is to be a teacher. With the men, the doctors are still number one. I apologize. But in both cases, the top two choices is to be a teacher. And this is not just because teachers are kind people, because they're gentle people. It is because of Charles Darwin. It is that when you are choosing a future husband or wife, you are choosing the parent of your future children. So you want to marry the smartest person in the room. And that person in Finland is a teacher. And that is why you choose them. So teachers have not just pay, more important than pay is status. Status in the society. Everyone in Finland sends their children to public schools. Everyone is invested in public education. Everyone wants quality teachers for their children. And then the conditions of work are good. The physical environment is beautiful in Finnish schools. And the social conditions of work are very good. Finnish teachers have more time to collaborate within the school day than teachers in any other country within the world. The paradox is, teachers in Finland know their children very well because they are not with them all the time. I love my wife a lot. She's here with me in Bologna, but not here right now because I would not dare to say this if she was. I love my wife. I love her more because we are not together all the time. Because, like now, when I'm away from her, I'm thinking about her. I have time to reflect on our relationship, to plan what we will do together. If I'm with her all the time, you cannot do this. And it's the same, know your children better if you're not with them all the time. These are some of the things about human capital, about attracting better good enough pay, good conditions, the feeling you will have interesting colleagues to be with, long, rigorous training, high selection, status in the society. This is human capital. But here is the thing. Human capital, if you pay attention to this, will get you a large group of better teachers 10 years from now. 10 years from now. Before this takes time to work its way through, it will take 10 years. It's important, it's urgent, but if this is the only thing, what will you do while you're waiting for this new population to come through? And the answer is social capital. Social capital is what you can do with the people you already have. The people you already have now are the people you already have. Principals do not get to choose their teachers, just like teachers do not get to choose their children. You have to work with the people you've got and get the best out of them. If a teacher is always wishing for better children, they're making a mistake as a teacher. If the principal is always wishing their world would be better if only they had different teachers, then they're probably not doing their job well as a principal. In the short term, therefore, what matters is social capital. How much trust there is in your community. In your school, do the teachers trust the principal? Do they trust each other? Or do the teachers gossip all the time? Do they tell little stories at the expense of other people? If your school has a lot of gossip, it's not just because you're Italian. It's probably because there's not much trust within the school. So all the messages go around the power structure rather than through it. Is there collaboration? Do teachers work together? Do they help each other? Do they share ideas? Or do they compete? Do they teach together sometimes? Do they feel responsible for all the children, not just the children in their class? Do the special education teachers and the classroom teachers work together for all the children who struggle? Or does the classroom teacher send their children with disabilities somewhere else? Do they collaborate well together? Do schools work together? Or are schools isolated from each other or competitive with each other? In Finland, in Canada, in Singapore, in all these high-performing places, when one school struggles, the other schools will help it. They don't say, thank goodness it is not me. They say, we are all responsible for the children in our community, all the schools together. If one school falls, we must help to lift it back up over time. This is what we see in this book, in all these high-performing countries that we have looked at. And here is the very big thing about the power of social capital. And it is a study in New York City by a business professor called Carrie Liana. She looked at 5th grade students, 11-year-olds, in 130 New York schools. She looked at their mathematics achievement, and then she correlated it with two kinds of measures. The first measures were measures of human capital, the teacher's skills based on observation, the level of qualifications, their knowledge of mathematics. And then she took measures of social capital, how well they worked with their colleagues, how much trust there was within the school. And this is what she found. First, both these factors matter. Both of them increase. High human capital increases teacher quality. Better teachers get you better quality. It's obvious. Second, high social capital is connected to student achievement. Teachers who work well together get better quality than teachers who are left by themselves. But here's the big thing. Social capital increases human capital, but the opposite is not true. In other words, no matter how poor you are as a teacher, if you are with strong colleagues who work together, you will become a better teacher just because of who are your colleagues and how well they work together. A poor teacher can become a satisfactory teacher. An adequate teacher can become a good teacher. A good teacher can become a brilliant teacher. And some of you will know when you've gone the other way, if you've left a very good school and moved to a school where you are by yourself, where you have no support, where nobody can help you, where nobody shares their ideas, you become worse as a teacher because of who are your colleagues. The opposite is also true. So, social capital raises human capital, but human capital does not raise social capital. If you believe that the answer to the future of your school is by finding 1-star teacher or 2-star teachers who can save your school, you'll be disappointed. It is like trying to raise the level of a football team, and I will mention no football team in particular, by thinking, I just signed 2 very expensive players and it will raise the quality of the whole team. It's not true unless they work together. So in the short term, the really good news is, until we can attract better human capital, until that policy takes effect, until we see the results in 10 years, there are things we can do right now with the people we already have that will raise the quality, the capital of what we have in our schools. These are not competitive ideas, right? This is not saying you shouldn't pay attention to human capital, but the ideas go together in combination, a short-term strategy and a longer-term strategy. And then we have to add to these a third thing. And this comes from law. And in the field of law, there is an idea called decisional law. And decisional law means simply How does a judge learn to judge? I don't know if this is the same in Italian, the noun and the verb. Is it? Yeah. How does a judge learn to judge? Because when you're a judge, the evidence isn't completely clear. You have to make decisions when the evidence is not clear. You may have lots of evidence, but it doesn't give you the answer by itself. How do you learn to judge? You learn to judge through practice. You learn to judge by having many cases. Your own cases, other people's cases, cases you reflect on yourself, cases you reflect on with others around you. How does a doctor learn to judge a brain scan? A brain scan doesn't say to the doctor, I have cancer. It's the judgment the doctor brings to the scan that tells them it is a cancer and not just a photographic error. It's the judgment that matters. I say this because in the Anglo-Saxon countries now, and perhaps also a little in Italy, more and more attention is being paid to data, to test score data, to examination data, to attendance data. I have been to Fiat Motors and interviewed half the executive of Fiat Motors in Turin, related to a new book we will be publishing in a few months. And at Fiat Motors, like every industry, they tag their processes green for satisfactory, amber, we need to worry, red, falling behind, need to intervene. These systems are in place in many countries now for children. So in Canada, in England, I can take you to thousands of schools where there are charts in the school with all the children's names in all the classes, and every teacher can see every child, green, amber, or red, every week. Every week. You look shocked. You look almost as if you're collapsing. Every week. The good news about this, when it works well, is that teachers together will look at the chart every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. They'll look at all the children. The teacher in grade 1 of 5-year-olds will feel responsible for what is happening to a child in grade 6, 11-year-olds, because they used to be in grade 1. They have collective responsibility for all the children. When the data are used well, they create good conversations about real children to make quick interventions before they fall behind. Are you following me? That's with good leadership when teachers are good colleagues. With weak leadership where teachers are poor colleagues, and we have also seen this in Canada and elsewhere. People will look at the numbers and they will try very quickly to find a magic solution to eliminate all the reds. Perhaps a bit more time, a bit more practice, a quick solution that is not about learning, but is only about the numbers. So the data do not give you the answer. The data are there to start to help a conversation about children based on judgment of the data, judgment of the children, and judgment about teaching and learning. Decisional capital is about how you develop this judgment over many years. And this is what it takes. About 10,000 hours is what it takes. Research in England, in Canada, and in California shows that teachers reach their best. They reach the top of their game somewhere between 4 to 8 years in teaching. And then they hold that until about 20 years in teaching, and then it begins to fall away. Not for everyone, but on average. This challenges us to think about two things. One is keep good teachers in teaching long enough until they're into that 4 to 8 year period, because that is when we are getting a return on our investment. So teachers must stay, good teachers must stay long enough, and we need the conditions to support that. The second is in this middle stage between about 4 to 8 and 20 years. Usually what happens in school is this is a time when we leave teachers alone. We think, they're okay now. We'll concentrate on the ones at the beginning and on all these problems at the end. And the ones in the middle, they're okay. So we'll leave them alone. You know what happens? They become like the middle child in the family, or the quiet child in the class. They or the 14-year-old in the middle of their education. They become the one that everybody neglects, that everybody overlooks. And what happens then is it's in the middle when they seem to be doing well and they're okay, but nobody cares, that they begin to fall away. And then you have problems at the end of the career. The problems at the end of the career for many teachers are not because they're old or tired or have aging parents or have other things in their life. The problem is often they've not been stimulated, challenged, given better professional development in the middle years of their career. Because if they had, they'd still be stimulated, learning, engaging, lifelong, all the way through. Pay attention in the middle, or you'll have problems at the end. It's not only about the 10,000 hours of practice and repetition, but it's also the importance of stretching, challenging people. If I learn the guitar, it's easy, it takes some time to do a few chords, A, E, D, E minor, B7. It takes practice over and over for my fingers to get... I think my time is up. It takes time for my fingers to get hard. It takes time to remember how to move them. And then a point comes, if you are musicians, a point comes where you have to try the harder chords. You have to stretch for the bar chords. You have to move your finger. This is very hard. You're stretching your hand, and you have to stretch and stretch and stretch again until you can play it. And this is true of any skill. If you want to get better, you have to practice and repeat, but you also have to stretch and challenge as well. So when you put these three things together, human capital, attract the best people. Social capital, get them to work together. Decisional capital, invest in your teachers throughout all their careers to develop their capacity for judgment. And pay attention to them when they're quiet and they look like they're okay, as well as when they're a problem. And if you do all this, you will be able to take the advice of 4 great Italians. They're coming. And these are in English, so I will translate them. The first is, this is about teachers being intellectuals. Leonardo da Vinci said, "People of accomplishment rarely sat back and let things happen to them. They went out and happened to things." We cannot wait for other people to turn teaching into a profession and to recognize teachers as intellectuals. We must begin individually and together by doing that ourselves. Whenever you go to a party and somebody asks you what you do for a living, never say, "I am just a teacher." Never say, "I am just a teacher." Say, "I'm a teacher. And you should marry me because I'm the smartest person in the room." But then it matters, if you are a teacher, who you have around you. Who are your colleagues? Whether you have good colleagues or bad colleagues is sometimes a matter of luck, but you can make your colleagues just as much as they can make you. Do not wait for somebody to help you. You help them. Ask for advice before you give it, because it shows you need advice and it makes it easier for others to ask for advice all the time. So bear in mind, your colleagues around you are very important. And Machiavelli, who I really do like to read, says the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men and women he has around him. And then thirdly, as you do this, this will take time. This will take persistence. Because as Marco Polo said, without stones, there is no arch. The beautiful arch is about to collapse. What does that say? Can I ignore that? The battery. Okay, well, so am I. I'm nearly done as well. So, without stones, there is no arch. And if you do all these things, if you take the lead, if you take the first step, if you have the right people around you, and if you persist, then as a teacher, you will understand with Maria Montessori that the greatest sign of success for a teacher is to be able to say, "The children are now working as if I did not exist." And if the government was a Montessori teacher, then the government should be able to say, "The teachers are now working as if I did not exist." Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Should I leave now?